Your favorite. Spears makes everyone trans. Yes, Spears makes everyone trans. That's a wonderful conclusion. Good job, Evan. Good job. I'm going to hell if I don't get banned off Twitch first. Where's the one that... Thank you. There it is. And now I'm framed this way. Nope, this way. Wait. To the right. No. I don't know who you mean. Is that JDF Signifier? Does he dislike white homo-narrative or normative marriages? Do you recall that being in one of his videos, Jay?
Hmm?
JDF Signifier disliking white homo-normative marriages.
I don't know.
All those motherfuckers believe that shit. Anyway.
Hang on, wait for me, because my internet crapped out.
I'm setting up the frame. And let's turn that on, and that, and that. Wonderful. Focus camera. Focus camera. Streamer. You caught up? Jay?
Alright, I'm ready.
Nobody can be ready for cringe.
This is JD Signifier, right?
No. This is
Oh, okay.
Nega Carl. I'm not gonna remember his name. I'm just gonna see my father's face. Just look at him. Look at him. Look at him. It's literally the same motherfucker.
Carl, if he was married to a white woman.
No, Carl in a loveless marriage. Why did I wake up today?
I masturbate with Mountain Dew.
Okay, I don't understand that one. Am I using it as lubricant, or do I just drink it like it's booze?
Lubricant.
I'm not movie Bob. That's how your dad got diabetes. Yeah, everybody's dad got diabetes like that, didn't you know? They were just jerking off in the Mr. Pibb and the Mountain Freeze. You know, they were young. They couldn't afford the normal brand. Dr. Pepper back then actually had cocaine. Call you the footnotes. Anyways.
I want to talk about a Goofy movie.
Readus.
The same fucking background intro music that almost half of like 50 different fucking creators have between themselves. On a stock edited background purchased from, I forget the name of the goddamn website.
Somebody has iMovie.
A Goofy Movie is an animated musical released by Walt Disney Studios in 1995. Set in the same universe as the Disney afternoon show Goof Troop, it tells a father-son bonding story about Goofy and his son Max, now a teenager in high school. In an attempt to grow closer to him after receiving some very one-sided news from his principal before school let out for the summer, Goofy takes Max on a road trip across the United States to fish at the same lake his father took him to as a child. This ruins as Max plans to attend a house party with his newly acquired date Roxanne to view the Powerline concert, who he reflexively tells her is the reason he has to cancel their date, and is given the opportunity to change the destination of the trip to the concert in LA. And with that trajectory comes a story about bonding, trust, and communication.
I've grown up! I've got my own life now! I know that! I just wanted to be part of it!
While its resources were limited in comparison to other animated titles from the studio when it was being made, and didn't receive that much love in theaters, the home video release for A Goofy Movie was where the movie found most of its love and appreciation. Quickly,
This is a lot of fluff. Also, I see that Powerline t-shirt. Yes, yes. We all love cartoon dog form Tevin, but, like, this is filler. I'm about to speed you the fuck up, motherfucker. Get there.
becoming a cult classic to millennial 90s kids. Now, there is a possibility that some of you out there only believe our need to claim A Goofy Movie is thanks to Powerline, which I completely understand.
I've never even heard, like, black folks, we gotta claim the movie because of the fucking the R&B elements. I've never heard of that shit.
I have never heard a single person say, yeah, my favorite Disney character was that musical artist based on that R&B artist. Yeah, you know the one, Powerline. Yeah, him. He's my favorite one. I've never heard that sentence come out of a single person's mouth. I've heard people say the Goofy Movie is fucking insane. I've heard them say the extremely Goofy Movie is when shit really gets off the rails, because Martin Short, or just the idea of Goofy hooking up with a woman his age. And that's where that whole, no, Goofy, your dad doesn't make love, he fucks, comes from. Like, I've heard that 50 billion times on the internet, because memes, and also because people actually remember Extremely Goofy Movie, because most people don't actually people didn't actually have or did not have the opportunity to see it in theaters. They didn't see it on VHS because most of the VHS movies actually didn't have that big of a spread around. You know, you go to your local Blockbuster, if you had it back then, you didn't usually see that, or you weren't usually asking for that film. It's one of those films that your parents just happen to have it, and so you watch it. That's what my family did. We have like 3 to 5 different VHS releases of the original Disney movies, and then that's it. Like a bunch of 80s, 90s, and early aught films, some cult classics that I personally bought for myself, and then like maybe 3 to 4 fairy tales, and then like the Disney films. That's it. That's the majority of most people's house lines. Also, I'm just noticing his razor bumps. This isn't important to the critique. I'm just noticing his fucking razor bumps. as I'm staring at his face. That's why you go. That's why you go with the grain, not against the grain. Got your face looking like it's infested with jiggers. Anyways, I don't remember people clamoring because of either A, because Tevin's in it, or B, because of the character that he is using his singing voice for. I've never seen a person make that connection. And most people didn't even watch the Goof Troop, let alone know what the Disney Afternoon is. And that's because most of the people who live in the US, depending on what station they actually have and how their local stations set up the channels, Nickelodeon, Disney, and Cartoon Network are 3 channels separate from each other. Usually Disney Channel is the first one, then Nickelodeon is the second one, and then Cartoon Network on the far end of it, and then a channel above that is TV Land. Most people will be flicking back with their children between one or another. Either you're flicking back to go watch one of the fucking Dan Warp sitcoms, or you're flicking to Nickelodeon to watch, like, Wizards of Waverly Place or Hannah Montana, and then you're flicking back to Cartoon Network to watch anything that is actually relevant to watch at that time, which, during this period of time, that's Cartoon. So, Codenamed Kids Next Door, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Ed and Eddy's Revivals, I'm forgetting one, Life and Time of Jennifer Lee, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, pretty much all the classic Cartoon Network films and cartoons, and like maybe the beginnings of Generator Rex, and definitely like maybe the later installments of Ben 10 and then Ben 10 Alien Force. It's not something that most people would have remembered. Mostly, a lot of the talk comes from online discussion. That's usually where I see people actually picking it up for the first time. It's online discussions. I'm 21, I'm reading Mr. Miller. Yeah, I'm 21 and I have vivid memories of Blockbuster. Who knew that when I was 8 or 9 when I walked in? It'd be the last time I ever see a Blockbuster. I remember seeing the Blockbuster in my city. I remember exactly where it was, and I remember when they tore it down. And they replaced it with, like, a yoga studio that, like, went under within a year. It's still across from the same plaza connection as the IHOP that was, like, up the street and around the corner from my house. What the hell was your childhood, Carl? Pain. My childhood was ass whoopings, TV Land, and pain. That's what my childhood was. I got my ass beat every single weekend with a chancla. And I didn't even do anything. Anyways.
He's a dark-skinned pop sensation voiced by Tevin Campbell.
He's not a dark skin though. He's got the same shade as every other fucking character in this movie.
Cap. I gotta make sure the safe search is on. Okay. So, Goofy's skin tone. You see that, chat? You see it? You see it? We're looking at it? We're looking at it? You see it? You see it? Alright. Powerline Goofy movie.
Some of this could be fan art. I need script because I don't remember him being that dark in the actual movie.
Like this is a film clip, but this is lighting on stage. This is also lighting. That is also lighting.
What about that one?
This one right here. Yeah, no, I'm not seeing a real difference in his skin tone.
What? Find the clip on YouTube. You could probably get a better. Because yeah, mostly you're just gonna see nothing but fan art or some other shit. Then again.
Also, by the way, just because people are gonna make the joke, yes, Max is an ass man.
Dad? Dad?
Hey, Dad! Dad! Do the perfect cast!
Okay, I wouldn't say he's dark skinned, but he's definitely a caramel shade.
It's it's not even it's not even to say that I was like, oh no, Carl, you just can't give him that one. It's like, no, it's just, it's so fucking inaccurate to just say. It also doesn't matter. Do children even know that he was black?
Like, no, he's a dog. They're animals. Like, who
Famously
cares?
known for the R&B bop Can We Talk? The same one whose lyrics are pretty much embedded in all of our DNA at this point.
Nigga, speak for yourself. Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
And his real-life inspiration are three famous black pop stars, specifically Michael Jackson, Prince, and Bobby Brown. But outside of Powerline being the first time we see a prominent dark-skinned, Goof-related character in the Goof Troop franchise...
He's a dog.
Prominent? Fuck all the rest of that. Prominent? This character was a one-off for this film as a plot point.
People love the soundtrack. Like, I will cop to that. Back in the day, like, it was one of those movies that teachers would put on a Friday when they were grading papers and they didn't give a shit. And like every time the song would come on, like it was a bop back then. Let's just say that. But nobody was actively, because we were kids. Like, we weren't actively looking for Tevin Campbell and trying to find out who he is. It was just like, yeah, the soundtrack was dope. That's where it kind of ended.
Yeah. Prominent.
There's more to why black millennials are so quick to claim a Goofy movie for themselves that
because they don't have anything else to claim?
Reaches
they're boring
subconscious levels. It's
subconscious levels.
It's Max and how he goes out of his way to impress Roxanne. It's seeing the differences in how Pete raises PJ versus Goofy raises Max. And it's also in seeing Goofy and Max's lack of communication being the result of pretty much most of their strife over the course of the movie, hitting so close to home with a lot of black 90s kids who watched this movie for the first time in 1995.
Yes, because clearly most 90s kids had single father households.
Yeah, single fathers, yes. That's relatable.
What is meant to be a universal story about child and parental bonding for every color and creed ended up having so much subtext in this story that we black millennials pretty much claimed a Goofy movie as our own the more that some of us picked up on it. And while I can't speak for everyone, the most I can do is speak for why those aforementioned moments of a Goofy movie spoke to my black millennial self growing up, now that I'm capable of reflecting on these emotions with a better sense of maturity.
For the past
But in order
5
for me
minutes?
to do that, I must first acknowledge the efforts made by a certain member of a generation that put in the time to make a Goofy movie such a staple for millennials in the first place. Chris Matheson helped write a Goofy movie, who was also the co-writer of the Bill and Ted trilogy, along with Ed Solomon. Because of that, a lot of the themes revolving around Max reflected that of the parents just don't understand aspect of early Gen X, with him being a Gen Xer himself. But because the movie was released in 1995 and Matheson put in the work, the Gen X angles and tropes that you think would be present in the movie were instead substituted with elements a lot of us millennials experienced growing up in the 90s in one way or another.
Yo, Stacy! Talk to me, baby!
Now, as someone who has watched media written by and made for Gen X, while there's a tad bit of evergreen relatability and aspects of it that future generations can possibly relate to, there's definitely a degree of separation depending on what's going on in the media. And that's because with every new generation, the transferable experiences from previous generations become more and more questionable. What might have helped members of Gen X feel noticed and empowered might leave future generations with questions and concerns about how they view society. And this is mostly because empathy and evaluation becomes more and more prominent with certain individuals who digest movies, television, books, and whatnot with each passing generation. That would explain why some Gen Xers can look at Bender's actions in The Breakfast Club as rebellious and unconforming, but most millennials and Zoomers just see an asshole bully based on his actions over the course of the movie. Why some Gen Xers supported Ferris Bueller talking Cameron into spending the day hanging out with him and his girlfriend across downtown Chicago despite being actually sick, while some millennials and Zoomers thought that considering everything Ferris was asking of him, that he was being a shitty manipulative friend. Why some Gen Xers didn't really see a problem with Sandra Dee's transformation at the end of Grease, while some of us millennials and those who are Zoomers only saw someone who already liked themselves as they were until they met a specific crowd of individuals, being willing to change aspects about themselves just to both fit in with them and win the attention of a man who was already going to do the same thing for her but immediately reverted to his default when he saw that Sandra already put in the work.
Tell me about it, Stud.
This type of generational gap in media for certain generations is pretty constant depending on where individuals range in the time frame of their current generation. Sometimes you as a millennial child of the 90s and teen of the 2000s luck out and get exposed to content that's both aimed at your demographic and written by individuals in or understand your demographic. But most of the time, the content you experience is literally the secondhand smoke of the generation that came before you.
Yes, that's usually what content from the past is. It's culture. That's what we call literary hand-me-downs. That's the fucking point. As for either targeted or made by people like you, it can't be made by the same people who are watching it, unless somehow they are a child actor who was put on the project and then were a part of the production. Or they grew up and they then made the material with jokes targeted at that demographic. And we already know what that sounds like, because we've already seen 4 to 7 different cartoons do this on at least 3 different fucking networks. However, those shows are ass! Because millennials writing shows about humor and topics and tropes and storylines for themselves is, with the exception of Gravity Falls, shows that effectively are more about the ideas but not about the substance. So that includes Star vs. the Force of Evil, Steven Universe, certain parts and certain jokes in something like Has Been Hotel, or in... I'm trying to remember the other name of the goddamn cartoon. It's not coming to Hell of a Boss. And the attitude behind someone like all those showrunners that made it. But even worse, and egregiously so, in the creation of Legend of Korra, and Voltron Legendary Heroes, and most definitely She-Ra by Noel Stevenson. Those shows aren't known because of their being good. They're known because of the audiences who they were meant to pander to becoming the worst fandoms in existence for fictional literary mediums, or Western animation, if not creativity as a whole. Because when you end up writing things for your generation that are supposed to pander to their sensibilities, and their sensibilities are, oh my god, look at how hot they are, you kind of end up with vapid material that fails at delivering its core concept. Or you end up with bait and switch bullshit, directly in the vein of, Masters of the Universe Revelations, where you have a celebrity fanboy, like Kevin Smith, bait and switch you. Because, guys, wouldn't it be cool if we had Masters of the Universe back? But you know what would be really cool? If we just subverted it for no fucking reason. Yeah, that's dog shit. I do not want to watch that. I don't want to see that. That would irritate the piss out of me, as it did many people. Not just because the audience that would then be upset the fact that everybody's not watching their favorite thing would then start turning on them, but the worst part is that the loss of communication and value in translation is deliberate. It's not just, man, why is it that people seem to think that this film isn't about what it's about? It's the deliberate subversion of doing so. And for that, you need to go nowhere else but fucking Twitter. It's not that the generations are losing things in translations because they don't have the experiences. It's that they're inventing situations in their head and literally making up situations to compare fictional mediums to. They take fictional mediums and they compare them to real life, and when the fictional medium does not hold up to real life, or when real life does not repeat this explicitly written thing in their fictional medium, they say, oh no, this couldn't be possibly true, and they throw it out the goddamn window. And start calling people pedophiles. Because don't you know, any woman who's a small diminutive person, it can't clearly be because of genetics. You must be a pedophile. That's the reason why all these characters look like this. It's not because different body types, it's because you want to fuck kids. It's wild that it goes there, but that's where it goes. And unfortunately, it's only 3 steps. It used to be 5 steps. Now it's 3 steps. Go onto Twitter, see a situation, make up a guy, bitch about it. This would be changed if people actually watched the things that they were trying to criticize, but unfortunately, when you allow people like Neuralities to tell you your viewpoint can be literally anything you fucking want, you end up with, well, unfortunately, what we have now. And that is the fault of the generation that is both making critiques and also listening to other people's critiques, not questioning them, and taking them as gospel, of which you might find yourself on this list for. Anyways.
Then, when it's our turn to create mainstream content, we subconsciously do the same thing. We create shows, books, and television shows aimed for younger generations, but they're either our stories or the stories we always wanted to see when we were their age, but couldn't because they were written by individuals who never experienced it.
Or, more than likely, it was a piece of material created by a boardroom of executives, and it was not intended to be what was in your head. You didn't see that kind of story writing until you actually got around to Adventure Time, and the writers started going onto the internet and started using Tumblr posts as encouragement for plot lines, which is the reason why Steven Universe became dogshit for 3.5 seasons. Because they started out with a really great premise and an idea, and then they figured, you know what we should do? Let's quote anime and Dragon Ball. That'll be what gets our audience hyped. Everybody remembers Dragon Ball Z. Everybody remembers Revolutionary Girl Utena. If we just reference them, that's the same thing as understanding the story point and putting that narrative in our story, right?
That's why Euphoria. No, that's it. That's the whole sentence.
Uh-huh. Play that one back again, uninterrupted.
Our turn to create mainstream content. Who was a millennial child of the 90s and teen of the 2000s, luck out and get exposed to content that's both aimed at your demographic and written by individuals in or understand your demographic. But most of the time, the content you experience is literally the secondhand smoke of the generation that came before you. Then, when it's our turn to create mainstream content, we subconsciously do the same thing. We create shows, books, and television shows aimed for younger generations, but they're either our stories or the stories we always wanted to see when we were their age, but couldn't because they were written by individuals who never experienced it. That's why Euphoria.
We created stories that we wanted to see or that we would have hoped would have been told to us, and that's why Euphoria exists. Does that make sense to you?
Not really, no.
Is he implying that Euphoria was made for the generation of Zoomers that are watching it? Cause, unless it's Degrassi, you know those motherfuckers are adults pretending to be children, right?
And it's on HBO. There's no way in hell a Zoomer age motherfucker is not. I'm not saying they're not watching it. I'm saying it's not made because it's on fucking HBO. Considering the content I've heard about it, yeah, there's no way it's been marketed towards them.
It's weird, to say the least, because it doesn't make sense as a sentence, and it doesn't make sense as a concept. So, if he had inserted Degrassi into the sentence, and he said, and that's why Degrassi, he would have had a point. Degrassi was literally made ever since its inception, from Degrassi Junior High to Degrassi High to Degrassi The Next Generation to the in-between Degrassi single title name only to Degrassi Next Class. It has always been, let's take child actors who are of age and let's put them in storyline scenarios that would reflect, if not replace and intercede with bleeding headline news of what a person would expect in a childhood experience. So that included teenage pregnancies, it included gang violence, it included drugs, it included school violence to the idea of a school shooting, which this is where we get Wheelchair Jimmy from. It's also where we get League of Legends playing rich kid about to genocide the whole school storylines from. It's where we get the I'm gay but I haven't accepted it storylines, or more recently, within the last 10 years, I think it was within the last 5 actually, Jordan Tulsi's character of Adam, the first transgender character, effectively dying because they got hit by a car. All of these storylines, and all the characters around these storylines, all have a very important connecting film here, and that is that the older generations, because the older actors would come back for guest appearances, they would come back and give hints as to what they did when they were children. So, a single-parent mother, like the character Liberty, who ends up getting pregnant by a school class clown and the... was it the school mascot? Yes, school mascot. Ends up getting pregnant by him because he tries to wear a condom that's too big for him. It fits like a garbage bag. And her entire storyline is learning how to be a single mother. So then when she ends up having conversations with future characters that have the exact same plot point, it comes with a level of understanding. The same way it did with the character Mr. Snake, who started out as a teenager character from the older generations of the show, and his character was the first one ever in Canadian history to say fuck. This being important because Canadians are polite. So to display such kind of generally even fictional vulgar behavior has a sticking point in understanding the mindset of a person. So if you were a person who watched this show and you saw this, you would actually be able to connect to the characters more likely, because rather than with the idea of a sitcom or a telenovela like Power Rangers, outside of the tokusatsu elements, you're supposed to see people who, as the face actors, look like you, who have characters like yourselves, would have qualities and would have aspects that would be reflective of the children who were supposed to either pick up A, the lesson, or B, could relate to them because they looked like they were their age, even though these were also young adults, around about, like, mid-20s, trying to be teenagers. They at least could convey the idea in looking good enough to pass. From what I know about Euphoria, from the sheer fucking clips that I've seen, and, like, the 2 music videos based on the female character who basically becomes a porn star and regrets it, this show has all the makings of somebody who wanted to create teenage melodrama, but wanted to insert as much gratuitous sex as possible. Like, I remember the show MTV Undressed, and the idea of how often they wanted to try and use that to put in these ridiculous situations for characters to be in, and then that was interceded by Paul Ignacio in The Life and Times, or excuse me, The Hard Times of R.J. Berger, and then Ashley Ricard's in awkward period. Those shows, of which one was basically axed off for the other one to exist, which was Hard Times in Favor for Awkward. Those shows, along with Teen Wolf, did not do the same thing. They were scripted shows designed to create drama for the sake of drama, because they were, before CW became the CW, doing the CW shit. And now, with the CW doing CW shit, you end up with the exact same thing in shows like Riverdale, which, by the way, review coming soon, everyone. Now, I don't know how soon. Don't hold me to it. You see the same thing in Black Lightning. You see the same thing in the fucking Nancy Drew show. You see the same thing in Kung Fu. You see the same thing in Batwoman. You see the same thing in Naomi. You don't see this in Superman and Lois, which is a godsend, because it's the only show on the network that actually deserves to exist. You see a lot of the shit in a lot of content that's made for the networks, and it's usually because this is how they want to get you to watch shit. For networks like FX, it's things like Sons of Anarchy, or for TNT, it's that stupid Snowpiercer series with is it David Diggs or David Davis? I don't fucking know his last name. I just know he's one of the dumbasses from Hamilton, and he's he's starring alongside old ass Jennifer Connelly with her crow's feet. All of those shows, and all the shows that have ever been on HBO, Showtime, Stars, especially if you were to consider that another one of these shows is one that I actually ended up watching to completion, and I was disappointed in how hard it fell off after season 1, American Gods. These shows don't have things that are meaningful in them. They don't. What meaningfulness could be extrapolated from Euphoria is like what meaningfulness could be extrapolated from the first season of American Gods. Because the ideas are there, the writing kind of gets there, but the context is, this is fictional. If you think that your personal life is reflective of that, of a dramatic, fictional character, like if you were a person who watched Shameless US, which is the best comparison I could give. I'm not sure how many people have watched Shameless US, but if you have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Especially this parts in the seasons that include Emmy Rossum before she left the show. If you have characters that reflect the lives of Carl and Liam and Lip and Fiona and Debbie Gallagher, or even fucking, I don't remember the fucking father's character's name for William H. Macy. I'm drawing blanks. If your life reflects the storyline of those characters, I have many questions for you. Also, I'd like to write a movie about it. 50% merchandising rights, because that's going to be a banger. Shit, I've been told, literally by her, to do the same thing with my own life. Like, that would be an amazing story for you to tell. It'd be wonderful. I probably wouldn't believe it, but I would know, and you would know that it's true. But, if that's what you think real life is, what the fuck are you smoking? I reiterate, what the fuck are you smoking? Who would ever look at Euphoria and say yes? Absolutely. That's what my life was like. Just being a drug addict like Rue. Just getting railed at parties because they decided that after I had sex at one with a fucking hairy lip nose motherfucker that looks like he is a guest star on Come Town. That's what I did when I was a female youth. I just jumped directly into a horror pool. Yeah. I just felt myself in all the holes so I could feel something. Seek therapy. Seek therapy.
No, that's it. That's the whole sentence.
I have to go on that long because that's how he ended that sentence. That was supposed to be a joke. But I know that it's not a joke. I have seen people do this. I've watched them. We've all seen them on Twitter do this. They're probably doing it right now as I speak. Again, seek help.
Thankfully, in the case of a Goofy movie, millennial children who grew up in the 90s had Chris Matheson, a Gen X writer who not only grew as a screenwriter as he advanced in his career with the popularity of Bill and Ted, but also learned, adapted, and aimed to better understand the voices of the generations that came after him in order to properly tell stories that they can relate to and learn from. To paint a better picture, both he and his Bill and Ted co-writer Ed Solomon had both Bill and Ted say a homophobic slur in both Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. While it was a widely used insult in a lot of PG-rated films in the late 80s featuring kids and teens, I'm looking at you, Monster Squad, both he and Solomon regretted adding it in the first two movies and made sure Face the Music, the third installment of the Bill and Ted trilogy, would do right in applying the changed behavior, to both Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter's relief. Now, while some would be absolutely justified in saying that such a decision is minuscule in comparison, others like myself can see this decision in at least the progression of Matheson's writing career over the course of the 31 years since Excellent Journey play out in how he was willing to expose himself to the changing times of the 90s in order to better reflect the generation a Goofy movie aimed to reach for.
Okay, but I'm gonna ask you this, and this is a very serious question. What the fuck does Face the Music have to do with a Goofy movie? And how is that analogous to here? Because that's way too far ahead. In fact, I think that's 4 to 5 years apart between those films. And then the significant time jump to current year. Number one, current year. Of course they didn't put in slurs. Are you fucking stupid? Secondly, how does that relate to a Goofy movie? Why? How? Not only just how does that relate, why does that specific important factor need to be mentioned in this sentence about the film? Wouldn't you be more impressed to show an interview of him talking through this process instead of you just saying it and expecting me to believe you? Some footage would be necessary here.
And while Disney initially contracted Jim Magan, one of the OG writers of Goof Troop, to write the script, you can see that Matheson's hand in how he grew in storytelling and being adaptable for younger audiences helped in delivering the reasoning behind why it's such a hit with millennials, specifically millennials of color. While, yes, the
Underdogs, how a Goofy movie became Disney's most unlikely sleeper hit. Drew Taylor of Vanity Fair, April 8th, 2020. The 1995 animated musical cast and crew on how their scrappy little production, it wasn't even a Boo movie, it was a C movie, beat the odds, get out of my face, beat the odds, and in fact, since you're going to put that in my face, I'm just going to do this. I don't give a shit about your website. Thank you, archivers. 1995, 2008 cast and crew and how their scrappy little production, it wasn't a B movie, a C movie, beat the odds, become a beloved cult classic. A Goofy movie released 25 years ago this week had an auspicious beginnings. It was conceived at the time when Disney's animated output was critically and commercially unparalleled, but this particular project was developed as a potentially direct-to-video spin-off of Goof Troop, a 1992 animated series that ran during the Disney Afternoon syndicated programming block. It wasn't even a B movie, it was a C movie, remembered veteran Disney producer Don Hahn. Instead of being produced by what was then known as Walt Disney Feature Animation, a Goofy movie was developed independently of the company's other features using international satellite studios. It was billed as a Disney movie tune. Box office returns being modest or critical accolades non-existent for a variety of reasons, it seemed to be destined to be forgotten, but against all odds it wasn't. A quarter century after its initial release, a Goofy movie, I'm making sure this can be seen on screen. That's kind of small, but we're gonna have to work with it. Goofy movie. I can scroll in, maybe. Is that legible for everybody? Chat, can you see that? Remember the porn banner banning ruined the internet, mostly Twitter. I mean, there's multiple things that ruined Twitter, but that was definitely one of them. The exodus from Tumblr made things worse. I'm going to just assume that chat can see that because I can't wait for everybody to reply. Blah. The Goofy movie became a true cult classic. Eager fans have made live-action tributes to it that have earned millions of views on YouTube. A Goofy movie merchandise became a hot ticket for several retailers. 20th anniversary cast reunion at the 2015 D23 Expo. Its official biannual fan convention felt more like a rock concert than a celebration of a seemingly obscure animated favorite. The way a Goofy movie achieved its unlikely place in the pantheon of Disney classics is a fascinating tale of false starts, bad ideas, and technical limitations. That this film got made at all is amazing. The fact that it became a cultural phenomenon decades after its release is downright miraculous. Even if you've never seen it, and you really should, it's streaming on Disney Plus right now. What a wonderful plug. You shouldn't be surprised that it follows Goofy's Bill Farmer, an anthropomorphic dog who decides to take his teenage son Max, like a Jason Marsden. Is he related to James? I don't know. It doesn't make mention. It has the same last name. Oh well. On a summer road trip, Max acquiesces, progressing since his main priority at school is out to attend a concert by his pop idol Michael Jackson's stand-in named Powerline, played by Prince protege Tevin Campbell. Was he a Prince protege?
I don't know. Maybe.
It's news to me. Along the way, Goofy and Max stop at a backwards possum farm that is equal parts Tiger King and the Magic Kingdom's Country Bear Jamboree, have a memorable encounter with Bigfoot, take an impromptu whitewater rafting trip, and eventually come to understand each other better, communicating ways they never had before. The film being heartfelt and fun with a blah 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 blah. Jeffrey Katzenberg, blah 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 blah. Struggling at the time with teenage daughter. Goofy's story supervised his first screenwriter team for the project. Couldn't figure out how to get through to her, but we ended up taking our target together somewhere along the way we bonded. It's like, okay, they were off, full of potholes and speed bumps. Big star to voice the character. Blah, 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 blah. A lot of this is just dry retelling of these things, but this is important background, which everybody should read at some point, since he's referenced it in his video. Something altogether unexpected happened. People started watching the Goofy movie on home video. It became a sleeper hit. Started for me a couple months after the movie had been released in videotape. Because you're absolutely right, it did not catch the world on fire. If I had read an article about what this family was talking about, how they had a ritual every night in which they raised their glasses before they ate dinner and said to the open road, I realized, wow, this thing has outreaching arms in ways I never thought possibly could. Creative director for Mondo fell for the film on VHS, even though he was a petulant teen when it was released. I remember loving it and loving the soundtrack. Through the years, it stuck with me through high school, becoming a cinephile. It stood tall as the years passed and popularity grew. New merchandise inspired by the movie was produced and sold in major retailers like Target and Hot Topic. Anniversary Blu-ray was released exclusively to the Disney Movie Club. BuzzFeed articles suggested that Max was now a hot lumbersexual. Oh my god, they're referencing that fucking BuzzFeed article. You know the one, right? The one where they age... Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's terrifying. That's terrifying. 2009 YouTube video that recreated Goofy movie's opening musical number after Dave in live action and amassed 5.7 million views to date. Initially, blah 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 blah. Okay, wonderful. I'm skipping to the end paragraph. When Han introduced the Goofy movie panel at D23, he called the film a Disney classic, even though its production and process and release would be classified as anything but. What was his rationale? It has none of the hallmarks of a Disney classic and all the hallmarks of a Disney classic, he explained. There's no princess, there's no castle, there's some raccoons and a banjo, but it has every hallmark in terms of its emotion and its relationship and humanity and storytelling connection that you would expect from a Disney classic, and that's what makes it enduring. We'd go into the one above that. Why, though, has the movie endured? Lima credits the film's surprising emotional heft. I think at the core of anything that lasts is something that is truthful, and at some point or another, we all feel this way about our parents. We want to disconnect from our parents when we realize that later that they were okay, they were doing their best, they loved me. Megan says that fans frequently tell him that this is why the movie still resonates to them. I have people come up to me all the time and say this is the only film that made me connect with my dad, that kind of stuff. The film has now also been around long enough for kids who saw it originally to have children of their own. A Goofy movie, incredibly, has become generational. It's a family bonding thing, and everyone thinks of their dad as Goofy being at least once. It resonates pretty deeply with people's emotions and family connections. It demonstrates the love that dads and sons have. Okay. If this is where he's going with this, if this is the reason why he referenced this as being the thing that connects people, first off, wow, motherfucker, way to put black people on blast! But more importantly, and secondly, I can understand this from the perspective of people saying, I looked at this, and this is how I ended up having a connection to my mother and my father. I can see that talking point. In fact, that's the entire point the fucking film exists for. However, I'm going to have to ask why you specifically say black. Because number one, I mean, you set yourself up for this. But number two, is it more to do with it being a good film, or does it have to do with something that is explicitly tailored, dare I say, coded black? Because now that you've referenced this, you're gonna have to make it connect.
The connection between parent and child, getting them to better understand each other, was a driving force for millennials overall. It's the small things and story beats that black children at the time both consciously and subconsciously experienced that made a Goofy movie such a unique experience for them. Because while they're key factors into how the story progresses, for a lot of us black folk who watched the movie as children, the touches that were made to give the scenario's uniqueness subconsciously hit us heavily in the relatability department. Both the good, the bad, and somewhere in between. So let's start with somewhere in between.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of the schools that I attended, being a black kid living in the city of Detroit, were underfunded thanks to things such as the after effects of redlining. I covered the old racist practice in my video essay on the first Candyman movie, but for a refresher...
Oh god. Are we going to have to watch this one too to have context?
No, just get on with it, Carl.
It's the systematic denial of multiple services to the residents of specific neighborhoods. It was, and still is real talk, a way of denying loans and government funding to people of color, poor white folk, and the neighborhoods they resided in by going not by race and creed to avoid civil rights discrimination, but by city districts and neighborhoods that were listed as hazardous or in the red. At least on the side of the individual, this practice shifted from going by red line maps to personal credit scores once the government started cracking down on these discriminatory actions that separated predominantly middle-class white folks placing themselves and gaining proper funding in their suburban neighborhoods to invest in better school systems and extracurricular activities, while the practice kept people of color in underfunded urban areas and from building generational wealth on their own. Nevertheless, despite putting an end to said practice, the damage was already done, and the effects it left in sectors such as the difference in public and private schools can still be felt well into the 21st century. Being a child and a teen growing up in the city of Detroit, only having the Detroit public school system at your disposal throughout your tenure as a student, the closest thing you could get to having a similar experience as those who attended properly funded white suburban high schools was if you made it into one of the 3 prestigious high schools in the Detroit public school system via testing or audition. Lewis Cass Technical High School, the school that I attended, Martin Luther King Jr. High School, or Renaissance High School. Now, I was in elementary school when a Goofy movie was released in theaters, about to finish first grade more specifically, so I didn't really feel the result of these situations that the public school system of Detroit had to deal with until I was much older. I might have always had an old/mature soul about me, but I think it's fair to say
I have to groan.
That at 6 years old, about to turn 7, my soul was probably around 24, 25 at the time.
That's why I had to sigh. I don't know why he had to mention that in his point.
And despite me not having Disney Channel growing up and my only exposure to Goof Troop strictly being Disney afternoon blocks on ABC and CBS, the only thing I mainly related to Teenage Max in a Goofy movie at the time was his willingness to impress Roxanne, because I was a kid with a crush on a girl in my class and only had Doug Funny's anxious ass to help me learn how to deal with it. Then, as I got older, I gained more experience in my blackness being an inner city black kid in the 90s.
Yes, because blackness is a stat line. You see, it gets bigger when you're older, and once you have put enough points into your blackness, you're able to transfer from being an African American into a black folk. It's the subclass route, guys. Hidden subroutines. Hidden subroutines. You gotta get that. You gotta get the hidden quest that is black trauma. That's what gives you the ability to level up, as they say. Yeah.
I think I grinded for that experience for like 5 hours straight.
Motherfucker, I was joking! Did he just say experience points?
Wait, rewind that, because I think I lost contact with the watch together and had to read.
Because I was a kid with a crush on a girl in my class and only had Doug Funny's anxious ass to help me learn how to deal with it. Then, as I got older, I gained more experience in my blackness being an inner city black kid in the 90s. I think I grinded for that experience for like 5 hours straight, mostly because my mom wouldn't let me constantly run in and out of the house.
Yes, he told the exact same joke that I did, except he did it lamer. Sometimes I wish that when on these cold watches that I would stop reading their fucking minds. Just once. I don't want them to be that easily predictable. Because it feels bad. I feel bad when I have to do that. And it mainly feels because I'm bullying them. Because I am. But because also it's like, wow, that is a very small learned experience you have. And it is unfortunate that that joke is the same, but it also means that you take that seriously. Like when he says, I grinded for those experience points, he unironically thinks that that is actually a bragging point. Like, yes, I have achieved a deeper level of blackness. It's not a martial art belt, baby. It's life experience. You don't farm for it. You just experience it.
I became wiser and more mindful of my surroundings and situations. I saw the differences in the field trips I used to go on being in DPS versus the ones my white suburban counterparts did. I saw the differences in our school plays, the fact that we had fundraisers involving selling cookie dough from Little Caesars while they barely ever had one, just so we could afford to have the same Scholastic book fair. That's why in regards to my rewatches of a Goofy movie on home video as I grew older, I was less invested in what Max did to impress Roxanne, and more invested in how he had the tools to be able to pull it off. Because
it's a cartoon, my dude.
Readers,
It is a cartoon.
It's a fucking. He was flying through the air, like bursting through shit. Like, come on.
I can only.
Are we gonna get a lecture about how he was how this white coated dog was dancing black next?
I hope not.
Oh.
As black folk, specifically black millennial adults.
Please stop saying black folk.
It sounds so phony, and you're coming from you, and you're black.
Adolescents, hijacking the last assembly of the school year with your AV club friends just to perform the latest single of a 90s pop star for your high school crush isn't one of the things that we'd actively decide to do. And that's partly due to the fact that some of us never had an AV club. But also thanks to how hand-in-hand black millennial youth was.
I mean, I wasn't in it, but we had it in our high school.
I was one of the people asked to be part of it because I was one of the only people in the theater that knew how to actually work the stage lights. Even then.
And it wasn't a rich high school. It's just a basic fucking high school.
Yep.
Because in AV club, all you need is fucking TV and a camera and shit. It's not that technical.
Mm-hmm. The theater was actually more technical than the AV because the tools are already supplied by the fucking school system. You just have to press record. And that's if you were lucky to actually have the ability to get that kind of personal announcement. Because usually it would be handled by the journalism team. And I did not have that. We were very lucky to even be able to maintain the fine arts program for the 4 years that I attended my vocational high school. Which is probably one of the better high schools to go to, because at least they train you for real-world activities. And few ones where you actually get homework economics.
Parental discipline of acting a fool, we never really entertained the ideal of doing it in the first place, especially if we didn't have teachers that knew the importance of their students being allowed to express themselves. And that theory is shot down to the ground even further once you take into consideration the long-lasting effects of redlining that kept said funding from even being considered in most public school systems within previously red and yellow areas. And then you also have to remember that this takes place in the mid-90s, when predominantly black schools across the country decided to save money by cutting budgets in their programs for the arts, thanks to the at the time modern day result of the same discriminatory actions.
I mean, let's tally up what Max used to make this shit happen. Well, fucking television or some shit, I forgot. A projection screen, which comes standard at like most schools. A projection screen, wire work, which is just him hanging from a fucking wire. Some smoke effects. This shit is not. Like, it's not. It wasn't fancy shit.
Even if he was to supply the most technical parts and was to nix the wire works on account of not having a proper safety harness, you're looking at maybe like $25 in supplies, assuming that you're using school property. And even then, most schools have a suspended projector, so you can be able to use whatever you need for your background. They even have fucking microphones. Proper plug-in box mics and also handhold mics. So like, that's cap. And as somebody who was also part of the course, we had more than enough supplies to do this. We had a proper electrical piano. We had a professionally trained teacher that was able to, even though she was a large, heavyset white woman, had the ability to command black males to focus, which is impressive, considering that at least 3 of the people who were there were football stars that were basically there so they could be able to hang out and talk to their girlfriends during class. Like, I remember one of the ones, he was one of our tenors, and he was close to pitch perfect and was also the quarterback. It was more impressive for him to be in that chorus room and more useful for his time to build character around people like myself than for him to be on the fucking football field. And even then, we had an extremely talented sports department. To this day, there are people who still can meet the adults outside of the environment whenever we're out in public in our city and town, and we're like, oh yeah, that's one of the students, and we'll be like, hey yo coach, because that's just what we would do. I remember being reprimanded during the middle of a speech of calling out one of our coaches, which was our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, Coach Scott, and saying that he was a golden god, and the principal at the time, one of the ones that we didn't like, not one of the cool white ones, just basically giving me this dirty fucking look like, how dare you call him that? Like, the normality of things that come in this, in both an inner and outer and suburban school system, is just part of the times and the age that you live in the culture. Whereas, what you're saying here, you seem to make it think that there's some mystical black spiritual connection that can only truly be divined to the person through static cling. And that's what gives its flavor. That's weird. I think that's weird. That's weird. It's weird.
For a lot of black youth who timely watched and grew up with this, the first act of a Goofy movie is a power fantasy, a way of allowing us a way of doing things otherwise impossible by living vicariously through a character that has the means to accomplish such expressions via proper school
That can be said
funding
about anyone
and
who
doesn't have
watches
to
the
worry
fucking
about being
movie.
disciplined by their school or their parents from the decisions they make because it's not there. And the fact that the decision was made with something already black-coded in the universe of the story helps with the immersion. Because if any black kid did what Max did in real life, proper funding or not, we all know that we wouldn't be Max in this situation. We'd be PJ.
Motherfuckers, speak for your goddamn self.
And speaking of how to not raise your kids...
We would be PJ. Like, there were plenty of motherfuckers who could dance in my school. Like, they were famous for, like, we would have, like, talent shows and shit. And, like, motherfuckers had nicknames because they could dance so fucking well. Oh, God. I remember one motherfucker was called, fuck it, I forgot his name. But, like, like, a lot of the, like, especially the boys at our school could fucking dance and were famous at our school for dancing. So he's selling his own race short. I don't know why. I don't know. It's these motherfuckers, like people, the black folks who make these video essays seem to have a lot of self-hatred and self-deprecation, like deep-seated self-hatred.
Or have lived extremely sheltered lives.
Yeah.
Even during the days of Goof Troop, Pete and PJ's relationship was never the blueprint. And while it was played up for laughs when it was used as a device to show off PJ's worried and timid demeanor on the show, a Goofy movie answered the age-old question about how abusive of a father Pete truly was to his son. If Max hijacking the end-of-the-year assembly to put on a faux Powerline concert for Roxanne is the power fantasy, then for black millennials who are brought up during the time of a Goofy movie, PJ's reaction to the principal informing Pete of the part he played in the matter is not even the tip of the reality iceberg we'd face if a lot of our parents or grandparents found out.
Oh man, my dad is gonna smash me like a bug.
There's a reason why a lot of us look at situations that either younger generations or non-black individuals find themselves in, shake our heads and go, my mama / daddy would have beat the black off me if I ever did something like that.
That is to speak to an abusive parent-child relationship. Because our parents were children once. What would usually get the black beaten off of you is if you did an extremely dangerous high school prank, like what one of my white school friends did, which was to put grease on the floor of every single hallway and steep incline, and then cause a flood that filled the school with water. So that when people tried to go to solve where the flood was coming from, they were falling up and down stairs. One person had to get their spine worked on. Another person sprained their neck. I would say broken, but they were not dead. Just a severe problem. They had to wear a cast so that they could be able to adjust to turning their head for the next 3 months. And the severe amount of water damage, electrical fire damage, and just general upkeep and repair that was now necessary because of what they thought was going to just to be a simple sprinkler plank cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And fortunately for them, their parent was generally rich. They were members of the country club, so the country club could just basically write a check and solve the problem that way. But we all witnessed a white father and his white mother, like hippie mother, become black for 10 minutes. It is a constant saying that I have on my content, especially on my channel, when I say Southern white women are not white, they are black on the inside. And it's because it takes a certain level of bullshit to bleed over and get somebody to become as generally violent as the general perception of fictional black parents are supposed to be. That's one of those moments. When your child has done something that has caused extreme bodily harm to not only themselves, but potential harm to others and to other things around them, it is a disrespect of their general environment and a disrespect of the place which they are basically meant to go to as a second home, which unfortunately most parents use the school system as a daycare for their kids. To watch him get his ass beat by his father was not as funny as watching his wife help him hold their son down and beat his ass, bare ass, in front of a school. Because he had to be brought up in front of the police on these charges. And even though it wasn't like it was a school assembly, 30 kids got to witness a white child get beaten like his name was Defon. It was funny as hell. That kind of culture experience is something you can only get from where you live.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, what you're suggesting here is just... Motherfucker, what? Like, oh no, I pulled a school prank. My dad's gonna beat me. My mom's gonna beat me. With the exception of me, most parents didn't even give a shit about what their child did. They probably didn't fucking know because the majority of us were latchkey kids. We had keys to get into our own house, and unless we were forced to go home with a placket and a document that said, you must show up for a parent-teacher conference, they did not know, nor did they care. And this is even including the idea of people who sent their children to boarding schools or Catholic schools, also known as literally just fucking halfway houses for whores. You're talking about a generation of children that basically thought that they could get away with anything and actively hid things from their parents, including personal family secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the least of their fucking worries would be getting in trouble for a prank, because more than likely they would just get in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension. Their parents would ask them, why are you suspended from school? And maybe they would get, like, a grounding, maybe get hit with a belt, maybe a switch, maybe a feather whisk. But they're not going to have the reaction as though their father has been abusing them emotionally in such a way that's made them into timid children. Unless you want to start talking about the other question that black communities don't want to have a conversation about, which would be the idea of how much sexual assault happens, but, Goofy movie doesn't have sexual assault, so that's out the window. General abusive households, that's common, especially in the South, but that would be the normal anywhere, and it wouldn't even necessarily be related to blacks, which you specifically said, because you said black millennials, and you said claiming it for black millennials. So, abusive family household related to blacks, cool, but just abusive parents in general. But specifically, the abusive structure of fathers to their sons or fathers to their daughters. That's going to be a hard sell for you to get me to believe. Because black fathers are not going to be nearly as hard on their daughters as they would be on their sons. Usually that'd be the room for the mothers to do. But there is no mother in the story. So, like... Again, what? Anyways, moving on.
Because depending on the parent, Pete's under-your-thumb way of initiating discipline in the household is the only way they know how to do it. And in thinking it establishes respect, because that's how they were raised and they turned out fine, there's a chance it actually establishes fear. I honestly can't count on one hand alone how many times I didn't want to tell my mom something growing up because I was afraid of how she'd react to it, and I'm not even counting the times that I actually received whoopings. And even though they were preaching things true, especially nowadays, getting those heated-ass talk-downs about how we as black folk can't be casually doing what we see white folk do, and how we have to be twice as good to get half of what they have, always done in the tone to make us feel like shit just for trying to live, by the way, always tended to drive home the fear of having to come to them for anything, because... you know how mama and daddy gonna react. You can't talk to them about anything. Pete's parenting might not have completely reflected these problems a lot of black millennials had in discussing things that resulted in that way, but Pete's ideals and how PJ reacted to said ideals every time we saw them on screen, both separately and together, was enough of a comparison for those of us who grew up in those types of households to realize the similarities. And it's even more disheartening when you see that PJ not only is naturally respectful of those older than him,
Here you go, kids. I want to go check out the hot tub.
Okay, sir.
All right.
but also naturally seeks out the respect of his father, most of the time to no avail. But not everything regarding the way Pete treats PJ in a Goofy movie is a projection of relatability with the black fan base the movie gained over the years. Because while the abuse he suffers PJ through over the course of it is psychological rather than physical, the under your thumb mindset Pete has is very reminiscent of generations of black parents who believed in whooping their kids, especially under the excuse of Christianity. Only Pete's phrase is a replacement of the more popular phrase, spare the rod, spoil the child. If we are to assign allegories here, Pete and his opinions regarding the place of children is very reflective of what a lot of Christian fundamentalist pastors preach to their congregations. That
Okay, so there's a break here that you need to make clear, and you're not going to say it because you've already glossed over it with the phrase Christianity. Fundamentalism is not modernity. There's a reason why people are moderates. It's because they don't like the teachings that fundamentalism would teach, and so they do not follow those. I don't know people who beat their children because spare the rod, spoil the child. They beat their children because they know that a child needs to be taught that there are consequences to their actions, especially when those consequences have far-reaching implications than just themselves and how they feel in their social group, but more importantly, the standing of a family in a place of business. Like, your child is being a nuisance, they destroyed a piece of equipment that the business requires to operate. Some kid backed up a soda fountain. Somebody clogged a toilet on purpose. And you, as the parent, now being responsible for their actions secondhand, have been embarrassed, one, and two, need to demonstrate that if they're going to act out in public, they're going to be treated the way that a child acting out in public would. Especially like the acting out that would usually happen, especially amongst black ANC churches, or just black individuals going to any kind of denomination or church that is not a mosque. That's an entirely different world. Especially that if they go to a Baptist one, a Protestant one, a Presbyterian one, or just your run-of-the-mill, generally spiritual one. Y'all know which ones I'm talking about. For mine, I'm going to use my experience of being at a black ANC church, which is St. Benedict de Moore, and then the one that my parents and my family generally went to for the majority of my adolescence, being St. Anne's, which is a church down here in Georgia. Generally full of white people, just normal southern folk. Usually you see people being well behaved. Normal suburbia shit. Black church, along with the idea that everybody's gonna get a fucking plate afterwards, the idea of seeing small children being put in their Sunday best but not wanting to be there is a norm, because they're children. So, the parents bring them to church to try to get them to understand values, and try to work those values into their life. At a normal church, you just go there, you're waiting for your opportunity to do normal things that a society would do, which would be Christmas Vigil, the Eucharist, eventually getting either your baptism or your, I'm forgetting the word for the Eucharist, confirmation, and then being able to no longer be the person who has to cross your arms when you receive the Eucharist, but actually being able to eat the fucking communion wafer and drink the fucking sparkling wine. Normality of these things relate to culture. The idea of claiming that it is inherently in black culture to beat your kids is, number one, a very fucked up, and I'm gonna say the word, racist assumption. It is racist to assume that. Period. Two, including the idea of the culture that comes with, the perspective that would be required to assume that that is how it was for everybody is a little bit short-sighted, because you can't assume everybody's experience is the same. But more importantly, because you said Christian fundamentalists, you have now written off and pissed off every single person who was raised as a Christian or raised within Christianity. Because it's not the same thing. Because Christian and Christianity are not the same. Any person who is just raised with the normal value of treat others as you want to be treated, and you putting them in the exact same viewpoint as the child is to listen to the father until that child leaves the home themselves, and the father is responsible for the sanctity and virginity of his daughters and sons, to the point that you're going to, in some places and in some parts of the counties, not country, counties. I live in what's called Muskogee County. You're going to see seeing some real fucking Alabama shit once you cross over into Harris County. And Halifax, and I forget the one that's next to it. Pretty much anywhere that's near Hurtsboro, Alabama, and maybe Montgomery. You're going to start seeing some real backward shit out that way. That's where that perspective would come in with. You're comparing people who would be unironically the kind of meme that you would think of when you think of the old, not the new, the old The Hills Have Eyes. You're comparing that mentality and those tropes to somebody who was just raised in a normal mid-suburban family. Let alone inner city family. That's fucked up. Shame on you. Shame. Shame.
That children are naturally prone to lying and manipulation and must be taught their place sooner than later.
I wouldn't say that children are propensed and are always in their natural state going to lie. It's that when children are young, they're mischievous and they want to do things that they know that they should not do. Like a small infant might not have the words to say, oh shit, I shouldn't have broken mom's table. But if he's reaching to get some candy on the table and the table falls over and breaks, you better believe that small child is going to zoom away as though he has the fucking speed force in him. Just cause like, oops, I wasn't supposed to do that. It's in their nature. If they have the ability to speak, they're going to have the ability to say this, as I did with my nephew. It's something all children do. It's not inherent to black children. I can promise you a small little blonde-haired white girl that might be in someone like Michelle's care, is going to have the exact same reaction as my nephew in my care. The only difference is that because I was raised the way I was, I'm not going to be an authoritarian. Authoritarian. There's the four teaching authoritarian. I'm thinking of the other one that's supposed to be more explicit. Authoritarian is the good one. Let's go with I'm not going to be treating them like a dictator. I'm not going to treat the child like a dictator. I'm going to try to reason with them. I'm going to explain something and the reason for it. Whereas usually what most people would expect of and think of us with black parents is you walk into the house and they're looking at you like you did something wrong and you didn't do anything, and for asking questions you get hit in the lip. You ask questions about why you're being scolded, you get hit in the lip. You try to talk back and try to straighten out and explain details of the situation. You get hit across the legs with a switch, or with a belt, or with a studded belt, or whatever physical object they have in their hands. My mother liked metal and wooden spoons. My aunt liked using her chanclas. No matter what it is, whatever perspective you get, if you start off with the assumption of children are rude and in their nature to lie, so you have to teach them that they can't do it, that's not actually teaching the child not to lie. That's teaching the child to be more cunning with their lies and more nonchalant with their deceptions, which is a horrible thing to teach children. And that's reinforced by bad behavior, and it's reinforced by the punishments to bad behavior. You're not correcting the bad behavior by beating the child. You're teaching the child to not get caught. Which is the reason why so many stories about the South happen to teach children about how they basically became smarter than adults because they learned how to predict how adults told them what to do. Moving on.
This mentality is what runs through Pete's mind when it comes to how he feels he's raising PJ and his overall opinions regarding Max's upbringing. Because according to the saying, spare the rod, spoil the child, it leaves us...
Well, he just had 5 black frames of just nothing on screen. Good job. Who would Jesus whoop a child? Stacey Patton, spare the kids, why whooping children won't save black America. PP 56. I don't know what that is.
believing that an unruly or spoiled child, one who...
Wonderful, he even has even more black frames. Did you fucking edit this shit? Did you watch your shit before you released it?
is a threat to family, community, and society, lives in a house where no hitting is allowed. Or, in the case of a Goofy movie, no psychological abuse. To Pete, the house where no hitting is allowed is Goof's house. And the spoiled child in this case is Max. And while he's doing nothing but perpetuating the cycle of violence and abuse probably brought on by his dad when he passes his said discipline on to PJ, he sees his child's fear as respect.
You know, maybe Max isn't all the things that you think a son should be, but he loves me.
Hey, my son respects me.
Yeah.
Disregards any attempt PJ makes to impress him enough in order to truly gain it.
Is PJ here?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure he's loafing around here somewhere.
And treats any attempt made to have a healthy connection with him as a joke, because children are innately devilish, liars, and manipulators.
Well, I heard the little mutant telling PJ that he changed the map, so you're heading straight to L.A., pal.
This is why Goofy's take at parenting Max leaves Pete so confused whenever he witnesses the differences.
You really had him fooled, Pete.
Me? You jumped out of your skin.
I was just pretending for your sake.
All right, sure.
Did too.
Did not.
Gives Pete a bit of a superiority complex when said differences give him the opportunity to either gloat about the psychological trauma he puts PJ under, or gives him the opportunity to tell Goofy, "I told you so," regarding Max.
Check the map, Goof.
And makes him insecure about what he's been brought up to be true whenever he sees Goofy and Max defy it with the actual intention behind the phrase, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." What do I mean by the actual intention? Well, while those of us who are brought up Christian know the phrase thanks to Proverbs 13:24, he who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is careful to discipline him, this verse is most of the time paired with other verses in Proverbs regarding corporal punishment for adults. The actual context for the verse is found by actually applying proper Hebrew terminology to it, such as the Hebrew word for rod being shebet, a shepherd's crook, used for guidance and protecting sheep from wolves, and has since been used as a symbol for leadership, wisdom, and the aforementioned guidance and protection. Because people under the Christian faith associate the rod to punishment, thanks to verses like, "A rod is for the back of one who lacks common sense," Proverbs 10:13, or "A whip is for a horse, a bridle is for a donkey, and a rod for the back of fools," Proverbs 26:3, we take Proverbs 13:24 and the saying it birthed by 17th century poet Samuel Butler out of context. The rod, in its proper context, represents leadership, wisdom, guidance, and protection. And if we spare it, the child in question will be overindulged in the wrong things. And while all of this can easily be applied and relatable to individuals of other ethnicities, this is a subconscious factor in a good amount of black millennials who had parents along these lines. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some who attached themselves to the implied trauma as much as there were people who attached themselves to the expression fantasy and overall vibes. However, it's important to note that just because Pete represents the widely misinterpreted take on how most of us were disciplined, that doesn't mean Goofy was a follower of the true iteration of the phrase from jump. Just like Max, Goofy made a choice, and from what I've experienced growing up, it's a choice a lot of our parents made all too well. None of the events of a Goofy movie after Goofy received the phone call from the principal would have happened if he simply sat down with Max and talked about what actually happened and why he did what he did. Instead, Goofy let the hysterical words of an adult of his generation worry him into making the spontaneous decision of the two going on a long road trip to go fishing, fueled by his own worry that his son was going down a dark path.
I'd seriously reevaluate the way you're raising your child before he ends up in the electric chair!
And every time Goofy hinted at said words to Max upon arriving home, no form of communication was made between the two regarding understanding the bigger picture.
Why are you doing this to me, Dad?
Because I don't want you to end up in the electric chair.
Electric chair? What?
And by the time the two of them did actually talk about what happened that resulted in Goofy forcing Max on this trip, so much happened that both simultaneously healed and hindered their relationship that all there was left to do was talk. What Goofy and Max experienced over the course of a Goofy movie was the theory of intersectionality. Specifically, intersectionality applied to individuals of different generations, but of the same community.
Motherfucker, that is not how that word is used. The dreaded I word. If he had continued that sentence on in a way that was actually meaningful, with a sentence that was not based in some bullshit, as in saying the reason why they were able to connect was because of intersectionality, I would have said, yeah, that's the normal situation between parent and child. Some parents, because of how easily worried they can become about them, will henpeck their children instead of simply having a conversation with their children on the level that the child is able to actually use their words and explain how they feel and why they feel how they feel. I had this all the time and can still continue to have this all the time with my own mother. When my father was here, I had that with him as well. But I have this all the time with my godfather. There are things that I don't feel that he would be able to relate to that he already understands, because not only was he a child once, but more importantly, he understands what it feels like to be a person who has to deal with having one father, or one, in his case, a single mother, have to worry about him and all of his other siblings. And the attitude of making sure that things didn't go awry because of that. And them being worried about him until the day that she died, and he then had to start caring for himself with the lessons she taught him. The same thing happens to all children. But what usually happens is that most children just get pushed in a direction by their parents. That is what happened to me. My mother tried to decide my future for me and did not listen to me until the consequences of her choices became the consequences of my own actions. Really, it didn't start clicking to her until I brought a white woman home. From there, the idea of how this affects Goof is effectively he was told bad news by a person, and if we were to assume that it was not because it's a fucking movie, Goof, instead of just talking to his son, instead thinks he has to do a big grandiose gesture to get his son to connect with him, which is normal for a first parent. Probably wouldn't happen if he had a partner to talk to walk him through it logically, but cartoon. You don't even have to go that far. Most children know what it feels like to be forced along with something that their parents want because it's tradition in the family, and them not really care about the tradition, and only do the thing because it makes the parent happy, and unless they actually bond with them over the activity, they just go along with it because it's easier to go with the path of least resistance. But to say that it's intersectionality? What the fuck?
Now, traditionally, the theory is used to show the disadvantages people have that overlap with each other thanks to oppression.
Oh my
race, gender, sexual orientation.
This fucking quote, what is intersectionality? What is intersectionality? What does it have to do with me? An unknown and uncredited, I'm assuming, article. You use this as the basis of your point. That's not to say that the point can't be made because the article doesn't have a named figure. It's that you're referencing these things and you're expecting people to do the actual legwork. I have to do the legwork because I have to watch the shit and I have to know. However, just intersectionality as a thing, I don't even have to look up what intersectionality is to know that it's bullshit.
Things like that, but it can also be used to see a disconnect in members of different generations as well. Goofy and Max are actually pretty decent examples here. Despite being a goof and afraid of being more and more like his dad as he gets older, Max is bold, daring, willing to do big things to, and forgive the pun, stand out above the crowd to impress people he likes, something that his dad Goofy doesn't really understand until the end of the movie.
Well, I think the only thing for us to do now is to get you up on stage with this power line filler.
And why doesn't Goofy understand it sooner? Because thanks to receiving a fraction of the whole picture from the high school principal, an important authority figure of the school belonging to the same generation as him, with his own limited perception of the younger generation he oversees, the over-exaggerated actions of Max are immediately translated to him as red flags, and no attempt at trying to understand the bigger picture is made. So because it was a way that made sense to him, Goofy initiates a road trip in order for the two to bond, just like his dad did with him. In the case of trying to bond with his son, Goofy is allowing his own personal lived experiences to get in the way of seeing Max's own experiences and complex identities that were manifested in ways that resulted in this happening, thus making it difficult for Goofy to connect with Max over the course of their trip. And it happens in multiple ways. The fight over the radio, the secondhand embarrassment Goofy delivers to Max at Lester's Possum Park. Goofy doesn't really make any real attempt to put the picture Max's principal painted for him aside and get to the bottom of what's going on with him that prompted said phone call to begin with, until they're both using the car as a white water raft, until there's literally nothing left to do but talk. Because he isn't given the opportunity to understand why all of this was necessary, or even explain the reason for his actions after trust was formed between them with Goofy's passing down of the map, Max experiences a form of discrimination among an individual of his community, or family in this case, at a different generational stage than him. While it's easy to apply this aspect,
I have to hear that again.
Raft until there's literally nothing left to do but talk. Because he isn't given the opportunity to understand why all of this was necessary, or even explain the reason for his actions after trust was formed between them with Goofy's passing down of the map, Max experiences a form of discrimination among an individual of his community, or...
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. What?! Didn't you know, Jay, when you were getting disciplined by your parents, they were discriminating against you. You should take them to court. Racially motivated violence. Oh.
Or family, in this case, at a different generational stage than him. While it's easy to apply this aspect of intersectionality theory to people of color in the workplace and whatnot, in order to better understand how porcelain people use our overlapping layers of identity for the purpose of...
Did you just call white people porcelain?
Oh, Jesus. I'm going to use a topic completely unrelated to a fucking Disney movie to explain my points about this Disney movie.
And while I do so, I'm going to insult...
The workplace? Why? Why?
While I do so, I'm going to insult white people by calling them porcelain. Yeah, yeah. Because you see, we black people, we are pillars of strength. You couldn't say a word around us and get us to give a violent reaction? What do you mean?
Of discrimination, it's just as important to take the... this theory and apply it to why our parents were so slow to hear our side of things whenever we got in trouble, or add another factor outside of the fear of extreme discipline as to why we were so slow to communicate with our parents in order to break the cycle.
Because parents are parents and children are children, and parents in a situation dealing with a crisis are going to go with whatever they assume is going to be the most official source of authority. Because the children might be prone to lie to try to levy the severity of the punishment they are about to receive. It's called pleading. If I break something, and I knew I wasn't supposed to be even around the thing for it to break, and I was told explicitly, if something happens to this, it's your ass, a small child would start pleading, don't do this. I remember being awake up at night because I had insomnia, and I wouldn't know that it was insomnia until years later, mainly as an anxiety trigger because of the abuse I suffered from my sibling. But I would be awake at night, so I would walk around the house while everybody else was asleep. Not to sneak food from the kitchen, not to eat snacks and just play video games, although I did that too, but later on in my adult years. It was because I'm a small child, I'm awake at night, I don't have a reason for why I'm doing it. It just happens to be that I'm awake, and I'm active, and I can't put myself back to sleep, because unfortunately, I'm a child, and I'd like to go see what happens at night. The same action would happen in the adult world, where you would see and experience the exact same dynamic from a boss to an employee. The only difference is that employees have to explain what happens, because they're the ones that are on the company dollar. And say, if you're like me and you're working at a place at Waffle House, despite the fact that there being multiple cameras, they're going to check the cameras to begin with anyways to officiate your story. But considering that you have yourself there, you have your coworkers there, you have other regulars of the business that would be coming in at a certain date and time, that would be people you'd see frequently. Especially if they were people who came because they were your regulars. And then also your police security guard, if you were like me and you worked the bar rush, you would have to be able to tell them on an incident report, yeah, this is what happened. This is where he was. This is what this person did. This is what that person did. This is how they were, and this is how the situation started. One example of that happening when I was working at that business was that somebody wanted something done to their food, and they were a racist customer that didn't want a black person, or in this case, a white person, a black woman, did not want my white lead cook to fix her food. She demanded that the small, in-training black server, who was diminutive and couldn't even reach the fucking meat grill, do it for her. This upset the customer, so she threw a plate at my head. Of course, we already have the camera to confirm that this happened. Of course, we already have eyewitness report to say that this happened. But it's still going to be the case of the most official person who's responsible, the relief manager, is going to report it. I am just the employee. I have to clean up the mess. We have plenty of ability to replace the plates because commercial eatery. But at the end of the day, I still have to explain what happened in my own words. They're going to listen, but if I were somehow involved in that, so if I had done something to cause her to have that violent reaction, it would be my ass on the line. Because invoking and enticing something to happen is not the same thing as it happening to you. Children, in this comparison, having things happen to them, like being taken on a family field trip because their parents decided, is not the same thing as a child being forced to go on something or having to do something because they did something that caused an even bigger problem, like being suspended from school because they were getting in fights or because they were caught having sex. Oh, whoa. Thank you. Welcome back, Jade. All the things that go along with the discipline have to do with the context. The context is that Goofy is a single father who assumed the worst. That's it. That's where it ends. There's no intersectionality necessary for it. Oh, God.
Because how it applied to the members of the household that made it so hard for us to talk to anyone that wasn't 15 plus years older than us. And as I stated before, despite multiple people being able to relate to this experience, this is something that can be 100% understood and relatable to Black millennials who felt the pressure of growing up being as pleasant, hardworking, and unthreatening as possible in order to thrive in a world that, while still mirrors the one your parents did grow up in, is making strides and getting better in ways to allow yourself your freedom of expression as much as it allows your white counterparts. Especially when, despite them aiming to make sure we had access to bigger and better than they did, said parents are still influenced by the times they themselves were brought up in. All that to say that I don't think they're gonna be sneaking us into a Powerline concert anytime soon. But there's hope for us to be that parent for our children, if we don't repeat the same mistakes.
Boy, this has been one crazy vacation.
And it's not over yet.
For a movie that wasn't given the same amount of time and dedication from its studio as its bigger projects, but was still given so much time, care, and dedication from its creative team as it did, it's both simultaneously surprising and unsurprising knowing that a Goofy movie was such a unanimous sleeper hit with a whole generation of people. And to make things more shocking, seeing that said creative team utilize what they assumed were very universal aspects of growing up and struggling to find common ground with parents in ways that both spoke to and resonated with the experiences of a whole ethnicity within that generation, to the point where they possibly looked at what was being presented, pointed at the theater or television screen, and said, "This is my life." Because, like I said in this essay, time and time again, many millennials of multiple ethnicities relate to a Goofy movie in multiple ways. But there is a reason why Black folk of said generation hold it so near and dear, to the point where we constantly expect it to show up at the cookout without a proper invitation. And while my experiences that I've explained in this video with how a Goofy movie connected with my sense of Blackness may be different than yours, the fact that there's another Black millennial that's watching this right now that can recollect how the movie specifically connected with theirs just highlights the very power this film has in giving us a sense of unity. And if that's not a way to see things eye to eye, then I don't know what is.
Uh-huh. Well, that's irritating. The problem with his video is that it doesn't bring people together the way that the film does. Period. Period. A lot of the shit that he says is sus, but none of it is something I wouldn't have expected. I'm disappointed in him. I'm disappointed in anybody who looks at this and says, "Damn, that's some shit I should listen to." But no. Especially on the intersectionality point, no. Goofy movie is a film. If you, like any person, like films from the past, or any films of current day, no matter when it was made, if it resounds with you, if it connects to you, the way that somebody could watch, say, fucking Boss Level, and could be moved to care because Frank Grillo made them feel things, that's you. The same way that it is me, with something like True Blood, or The Sopranos, or The Wire, or Oz, or Nurse Jackie, or Dead Like Me, or anything that you could reference as films that, or pieces of literature or pieces of entertainment that connect to you in this way. In the case of the Goofy movie, if it's a wholesome movie that has become tradition in your home, that is more important than assuming that the reason why your parents treated you poorly was because of an intersectional difference in their parental style of discipline. Pain Pain is a word to describe what it feels like listening to somebody say something like that. Not just pain in cringe, pain in my soul. Because whatever personal experience that they had that brought them to write that as a script and then repeat that as words in a video is going to put the wrong impression in someone's head. That this is the reason why. Between that and the fact that the music kept stopping in between every single fucking take and then picked back up because they didn't have the ability to fucking put the music in Audacity and loop it, drives me mad. Thoughts? Jay?
I got none right now.
Head empty, stomach empty, need food.
Yes, indeed. The video's over anyway.
Yeah.
That was nothing. That was literally nothing.
Literally fluff.
Mm-hmm.
Catch back up on chat. I love when Carl breaks things down. I feel like a kid sitting in front of a sage's feet. If that sage has well, actually, no. That is true. Most sages do have unkempt hair. Forgot I didn't do this and you deserve it. Well, thank you, Jade. That's wonderful. Do you count all your parts or just the white ones? If I was to only count the white ones, I'd be only counting for like 1/36 of my nationality and heritage. Which is awkward, to say the least. If I was to only account for the white and black parts, I'd be only accounting for like maybe 3/32 of a part of myself. It's a very weird equation. Which is the downside of being multiracial, but it is what it is. Also, hello! Parents are probably gonna make me get married too. I just watched the Karen video and it really cheered me up. Thanks for all your hard work. So, well, thank you. And Jay also says thank you.
Yes, I do.
With how he said secondhand smoke from the previous generation, no wonder most cartoons sucked ass. True! True. Bruh, in 30 seconds time. What do you mean that's disgusting? Does being interracial disgust you? Anyways, that's enough of that shit. I need to go prepare my mother's food. And I will be back in like maybe 30-ish minutes. No, him not knowing how to loop audio. Yeah, that's fucking disgusting. I don't know why he wouldn't know how to loop that. It's just as simple as track the sound to the fucking point you want repeated, and then cut it. You're using the same jazz clip throughout, so as long as you fucking mix it correctly, it should be seamless. I've done this with so many fucking musical tracks that I've posted as videos on my channel. Including the theme song for the Fried Chicanery. It was so easy to do that, for a long drawn-out thing. I don't know, people just need to learn how to use Audacity, I guess. The old versions, not the new versions. The new versions will steal your data. But anyways, I need to go prepare my mother's food. I'll be back in 30 minutes, chat. I don't know what I'm going to do then. Probably more Elden Ring. And this will go up in like, I don't know, an hour? A day after today? I don't fucking know. I'll see you all in 30 minutes. Goodbye, guys! Oh, my back. My spine. My front. My hip. My coccyx. What?
What happened?
I stood up. I'm past 25. This is when the arthritis starts kicking in. Yes, the pain of being old. Carl, don't die, goddammit. No, I'm not gonna die. I'm just in physical pain as I try to realign my spine into straight position. It's like pins being driven through your kneecaps. Except it's whenever you bend your knee. Anywho, 30 minutes to an hour. If I don't arrive back by then, I'm on Twitter. I'll see you guys in like an hour.